This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, episode 55. I do notice that one topic seems to come up over and over and over again. People wanting to know about the speeds and feeds. This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, a show which answers one question from you, the listener, about CNC router tables, CNC software, hardware, web hosting, and business. I'll help you get started in your CNC hobby or business and help you cut through the confusion.
Today's episode is sponsored by themakersguide.com. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Griggs, and I am very happy to be here today to talk with you about your CNC router table, about your conversion from a hobby to a business, tips and tricks to get you going faster with your CNC router table, and interviews with movers and shakers in the CNC routers community. Now, since our last episode, episode 54, where we interviewed Keith McCulloch of Centroid CNC, we've had a lot of responses from people to that episode. In fact, we've had quite a few listens to it. It is over 1,700 downloads so far on that episode, which is a very high rate of download for an episode, particularly one in this small and niche a market as CNC router tables. But it shows that folks are, very interested in learning about new technology and new things that are out there. And I was very happy to bring the Centroid Acorn to the attention of the CNC router tips community. And there's been a lot of people who have been going out and grabbing one of these boards and using it as a controller for new CNC projects. So it's very interesting times we're living in, where, a company will come out with a product specifically for the hobbyist market. And I think that that's really cool. We've been having some very good growth inside of the CNC Router Tips community on Facebook. And we're at around 11,500 people at the time of this recording. And, it's been growing steadily as a lot of people come in. Now, one of the things that's interesting about the community is that the members take the time to answer each other's questions, share files, show you pictures of their latest projects and their machines and everything. And it really is a place where people come together and share and, help to teach each other. The response to the group, which has a hashtag in front of its name, hashtag CNC Router Tips group on Facebook if you're looking for it. It's not to be confused with any other CNC Router Tips groups that are out there. This is the only one that's affiliated with this podcast. But if you have noticed, Facebook has been making a lot of changes lately in the way that they do everything. And one of the things that they allow group administrators to do now is to ask members a question in order to qualify for membership in the group. And so we've done that over the last couple of months with this hashtag CNC Router Tips podcast group and on Facebook. I've been collecting these answers to these questions so that I could look at them and see, exactly what's on the minds of the folks who are wanting to join our group. And it's been very, very informative. Now, as you know, I try and teach you about the things that I've learned from other sources about building businesses and about managing online business and things. And a few years ago, I read a book that really changed the way that I thought about how I was going about my internet marketing. One of the things that I was running into as I was trying to build my online business, was wondering, what it was that people wanted. I mean, I could always guess. When it came to CNC, there just wasn't enough data points really for me to make intelligent, informed guesses. And so this book that I'm about to tell you about really set me to thinking differently about how I would go about getting any product to market. And this can apply to the woodworking that you're doing. It can apply to, setting up a website. It could apply to launching a product on Kickstarter. It could apply to setting up a group, because you really don't know what your listeners, what your audience, what your customers want until you ask them. And the name of the book that I'm referring to is Ask, and it's got even longer subtitle. But the subtitle of that is The Counterintuitive Online Formula to Discover Exactly What Your Customers Want to Buy, Create a Mass of Raving Fans, and Take Any Business to the Next Level. And it's by Ryan Levesque, and Levesque is spelled Levesque. Now, I've read this book. I've listened to the audiobook several times, and it really has helped me because it teaches the principle of asking a deep dive question. And what a deep dive question is to ask someone specifically, and you want them to be specific in their answers, what is the biggest pain point or the biggest problem that they're encountering in your topic? A pretty simple question, but what's the single biggest thing that's giving you trouble in CNC? Or what's the single biggest thing that you want to learn more about in CNC router tables? Or similarly phrased questions to that. And so I decided I would take the principle of that question and I would ask it to people who wanted to become members of the Facebook group. And I was very surprised and pleased to find out that about 30% of the people who applied would actually answer the question. And maybe 20% of people would give you a detailed description of exactly what it was that they were having trouble with and, wanted to know more about. And so I'm going to attempt over the next few episodes to answer some of these people's questions that they have asked as a result of applying for membership in the Facebook group. And hopefully by answering those questions, I will, do them a service, help them to get the information that they've been looking for. And I may educate some other people who may have had the same question but were afraid to ask. So I highly recommend if you're doing anything at all where you're trying to perform a service or grow a business, that you check out this book by Ryan Levesque, and it's called Ask. And I'll put a link inside of the show notes for this. You'll see the show notes at CNCRoutertips.com/55, which is the episode number, episode 55. And there will be a link inside there where you could go and order a copy of the book or get an Audible subscription and listen to it if you're more inclined to listen than to read. Really worth reading. It's a great book. Okay, so with that in mind, I just wanted to bring up the point that when I first started this podcast, my idea was to answer people's questions about CNC. And, I set it up initially so that folks could leave a voice message asking their question. And many people were hesitant to do that. They don't like the sound of their voice. They didn't want to be out there or whatever. So by doing it this way, with having people answer questions to get into the group, I'm generating enough questions that I can probably fill a few episodes with it. So I'm very happy about that because it allows me to do that and maybe just set up a segment in each of the shows where I answer a question, or if the question has, some serious legs and there's, a lot of meat there, we can go and take a deep dive and just, spend an episode answering that question. So that's kind of where we want to take this. Another side benefit of people answering these questions when they apply for membership to the group is that it will allow me to build up a frequently asked questions list that I can put up on the CNCRoutertips.com website, so that people can just go there and look and try and find the answer. Maybe it will be right there and they won't have to waste their time, searching for it elsewhere. So very cool use of a resource that's available to us. And, I applaud Facebook for adding that as a feature. And I hope that you will enjoy these episodes with the answers to members' questions as much as I will enjoy doing them. And so far, we've received just a little under 300 answers to the questions. And I do notice that one topic seems to come up over and over and over again.
Today's episode is sponsored by The Maker's Guide, creator of the Triple Edge Finder. Get the edge you need, save time and frustration on your CNC project, and make setup a snap. Save time and material. Set up your workpiece on your CNC router table faster than ever. Accurately set your Z-axis height first time, every time. Automatically locate the corner or edge of a workpiece. Reset your starting point in the middle of a program. Quality crafted right here in the USA on US-made CNC machines. Get the edge you need today. Go to www.themakersguide.com/edge. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
I do notice that one topic seems to come up over and over and over again. And that topic is people wanting to know about the speeds and feeds that they will need to use with their router. Now, in order to answer that question, you need to know a lot of things. You need to know first and foremost, what CNC router table you're using. And they vary quite a bit depending on their capabilities. I mean, if you're using a commercial CNC router table like they would use to create cabinets or furniture, that takes up half a football field or something, you've got different constraints on that machine than if you were using, let's say, one of the beginner machines like a Stepcraft or a Shape Boco or an X-Carve. Okay, because each of those has a different amount of rigidity and a different amount of horsepower that they can use and have available. And based on those things, how rigid the machine is and how powerful the motor is will really control what it is that you're able to cut successfully and, how you go about it. So also, one thing that I notice in a lot of users, they tend to use the same bit for everything. I know when I got started in building my CNC router table, everybody was talking about using a 1/4-inch bit to do everything. It was an up spiral bit at that time, and then later on it became a down spiral bit, and then some folks were varying it and it became an O-flute bit, but they were always a 1/4-inch. And I wondered about that. And it was because someone somewhere when they got started posted that they had had success with a 1/4-inch bit, and they posted the information on, what they were cutting at and what speeds. And so everybody started from that known point and began, working with a 1/4-inch bit. But there were a lot of times with an 1/8-inch bit or a 16th-inch bit was a better fit for them. And there were times when a 1/2-inch bit or even an inch bit would be the smart tool to use. But people were outside their comfort zone. They were outside their knowledge base, and they hadn't figured out a good way of knowing whether their machines were capable of using those larger bits or smaller bits And so they were afraid to experiment because it gets expensive when you start breaking bits. So I'm not planning to answer this speeds and feed question today in this episode because it would take an entire episode, and I would like to do that, but I would like to do it scientifically. So I intend to get together and get together some information on speeds and feeds, some of the latest information that we have available on this subject. And I'm going to ask an expert to come in and help me discuss this topic with you in an intelligent, scientific way. And I know of no one who is better qualified to do that than Bob Warfield. We had Bob on the show in episode 43, where we talked a little bit about his adventures in business and, getting how he got started in the CNC. But we really didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about the software that he produces, GWizard, which is a really great piece of software. So I'm going to ask Bob if he will come back on the show, and we can go into depth into the speeds and feeds and what's behind it and how he uses his tool to help people to use their CNC router tables in a better way. Now, I've been using the software for about 2 years now, and I've really seriously started using it last year. And since I have started using this, I have not broken a router bit. And I'm in the shop quite frequently doing a lot of things, and so I think it would be beneficial to you. So look forward to that episode with Bob, and I'm going to try and make it happen as soon as possible to get him on the show to help out with this question. So that's something that I hope you'll be looking forward to and will enjoy. Meanwhile, you can go back to episode 43 by going to cncroutertips.com/43, the numbers 4 and 3, and check out the episode. There's still enough information in that to get you started in the right direction. Okay, as our regular listeners may be aware, and I'd be really surprised if you weren't aware, about a year ago I purchased a CNC milling machine from Tormach, which is a pretty cool company here in Wisconsin, here in the United States. It has been a game changer to me because it's allowing me to produce products that I sell to the CNC market. I make an edge finder and a Z0 touch-off plate called the Triple Edge Finder. And you may have heard the announcement at the beginning of the show that this episode is sponsored by the Maker's Guide. Prior to purchasing the Tormach, I was making the parts on a Haas milling machine in a friend's shop. And I really needed to be able to make my own stuff because, he was busy and I had to work around his schedule. And so getting the Tormach was a great solution for me. Well, when I first got the machine, I began talking about it quite a bit inside the CNC Router Tips group and posting videos occasionally. And I had one member there say that he was disappointed that I wasn't talking more about the router tables. But, here's my take on that subject. I talk about what interests me at the time it interests me, and I talk about what it is that you ask about. And when my interest, or when I'm excited about a project, I'm going to talk about it. It's my podcast. It's my Facebook group, and I don't think that I would be well advised. I only had one listener complain about hearing about what my experiences were as I became a new owner of this machine, and so periodically I may talk about my experiences with the milling machine. I think that the things that you can learn from milling metal apply to milling wood in a lot of cases. You just have different feeds and speeds and different requirements for how to keep the bit cool and functioning. But every day I learn something new. And I just recently got some new attachments for the machine, which are going to make it easier for me to produce my products. And I will probably share some of that on my YouTube channel, Bill Griggs. If you're looking on YouTube, just type in Bill Griggs and you'll find my YouTube channel, where I'm going to explore making a few new products for the CNC router market. And there are two that I hope to have out before the summer rolls around. And if we get the production going, I think there's something that you would enjoy based on some of the responses I've gotten when I've talked to people. These are things that are, not readily available in the market, and I think, I'm hoping that they'll be good. Maybe I will use the techniques in the Ask book to, survey a few people to find out if what I think is what people want is actually what they want before I go ahead. So, just be aware of that, and I just thought I would let you know about it. So if you occasionally tune into the CNC Router Tips podcast and we're talking about milling, machining instead, well, that might just be a temporary thing on that episode, and it will probably be short in nature, because you came here looking for information about CNC router tables, and I respect that. But I hope that you will also respect my right to talk about other related topics other than just CNC. So with that said, I think we're going to tie this episode in a nice bow and send it out into the world so that you can maybe get your fix of CNC Router Tips podcast for the week. And we're going to start off in the next episode answering some of our members' questions. So I hope you've had fun listening to this episode, and I hope it inspires you to get out there in the workshop and to do something, take action, and get your machine up and running and learn something new. I often mention many different types of software during the episodes, and hardware and cutters, and it can get a little confusing. So what I did was I put together a page on my website, cncroutertips.com/resources. And on that page, I list all sorts of resources there, from books to tools to software, all the things that I use that make my CNC experience better and easier. And I hope you'll check it out. So again, it's cncroutertips.com/resources. Now, if you'd like to have your question featured on the air, here's how. Need help? Ask me about your CNC router question on my podcast, the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'll be glad to help, or try and get you the help you need. I want this podcast to be a fun and personal experience for everyone, and helpful. So let's keep it real and ask sensible questions. Please use common sense and show courtesy to everyone. That way everybody wins. Here are some guidelines to ensure that your question is qualified to be featured on the show. Please keep your questions under 1 minute in length. If it goes a little over that, that's fine, but don't ramble. If you have a website and URL, you're allowed to share it, but only once during the recording. Spammy or disrespectful or deeply private questions will not be considered for the podcast. If you need to ask more than one question, just make each question a separate voicemail. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. I'm your host, Bill Griggs, and I really hope that you have a great day.